Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Beyond the Pain, Heart and Home Healing After Loss. Ladies, grab a pen and paper because you are going to want to remember every single word that is spoken by my guest here today. Between her masterclass that she offers and all the free content that she puts out there, this woman has completely changed everything I've ever thought about childbirth, like in the absolute best way. She is the creator of the Pain-Free Birth e-course, childbirth educator, podcast host, so much more. Today I have on the show with me Karen Welton. Karen, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Emily. It's an honor.
So, first of all, I want my listeners to know, before we get deep into any conversation, where your experience and your credibility comes from. You know, you've literally created an entire successful e-course called Pain-Free Birth. And that's what your whole message is about. So where did this all stem from you?
Yeah, it's pretty wild, right? Like kind of audacious to be naming your course that. And
Yep.
and I did that on purpose. It all started when I was pregnant 12 years ago with my first daughter, having learned not a whole lot about childbirth other than the scary movies and videos you see growing up, and some even videos my health teacher showed me in, junior high, trying to scare us all high schoolers into celibacy, showing a video of her sister giving birth screaming, and you could audibly hear her tearing. I don't even know how that's possible, but just like being imprinted with all of this stuff, and just like having a lot of fear around childbirth, not knowing a whole lot, and really feeling like, okay, there has to be a better way. There has to be another way to give birth. And if there is a better way that doesn't involve all this pain and suffering and trauma, then I'm going to figure it out. And so I just went on my own sort of spiritual journey of really petitioning God and praying and researching and diving into books on physiology and Ina May Gaskin and the science behind it, and the faith behind it, and really putting those two together, the faith and the science, and figuring out, okay, if this is possible, I'm going to figure it out. I'm someone who asks a lot of questions. I'm someone who doesn't just take, this is what it's supposed to be, and this is what you're supposed to believe. You're supposed to have pain in childbirth, like we're all told. And I essentially just decided, like, I read stories, I met women who'd had births, experiences like this, and just it started to click. It started to all make sense. Like, okay, this is the way God designed my body. It's not cursed. It's not broken. This is real. And long story short, I had a mostly pain-free birth with my first daughter. There was pain in the beginning. God showed me how to relax through it. I embrace the contractions in my body rather than resisting and fighting them, and that made all the difference in the world. And then went on to have two more home births, both of which were mostly pain-free, with the exception of some figuring out how to push without pain, and how to really sink into those really tough contractions. Even my second was asynclitic, and it was by no means an easy labor. It was over 24 hours. So I share a lot of stories on my podcast of women who have these fast, smooth labors, and it just proved to me that even with a difficult labor, even with a baby that's not in the best position, or a really long, like, marathon labor, it can be beautiful. That whole birth was a party. It was like joy-filled, joy-infused, worshiping them, and so it was just a spiritual experience for me. So it transformed me, and I immediately decided I have to tell women that this is possible. And that's really what it came from, was just me realizing, okay, I gotta shout it from the mountaintops. Like, women are being lied to. We're being told, we're being conditioned, this is supposed to be painful. There's no way around it. It's just the way it is. You're cursed, or your body's just born this way, and you're shoving a watermelon through your vagina. Like, all these crazy things that we're told. And I just had to tell women, like, there's another way to do this. So I became a doula after my first daughter, sat there in the training with a 3-month-old, learning hip squeezes and sideline releases and all this stuff, and then went on from there to just serve women one-on-one and sit at their feet and learn from them, and really trial and error all these theories that I had been learning, that the Lord had been showing me, and that I've been researching, like, why is it painful for someone and not someone else? Why is someone's labor long and the other one not? And trying to understand what makes birth happen the way it does, and really dissecting it, like research and development. So that was like 7 years. And then created my e-course, which originally was going to be a book that I then realized I have to get this information out. Women are asking me for it and really demanding it now. Like, I'm pregnant now. I can't wait for you to publish a book. So it became a course, started just as a free Facebook group, and just adding to my knowledge and my experience, and then sharing each other's testimonies. It really became, I wanted to create like the biggest hub of supernatural pain-free birth stories in the world, where women could come, because it took me months just to find one pain-free birth story, for me to realize, okay, this is happening today. This is happening to women I know. It's possible. Like, I just needed that one story I prayed for. And now I get stories every day, and we share them every day on my podcast and my social media, and it's shifting the way women think about birth. You know, one woman at a time, one birth at a time. My goal is to shift the culture of birth so that women are no longer afraid of childbirth. And whether or not their labor is pain-free is, you know, secondary. It's kind of like the icing on the top. But if we can have joyful, empowered, fear-free experiences where we believe in the power of our own bodies and the way it's designed, to me, that is the biggest win in the world and sets you up for success as a mother.
That is amazing. It's such an incredible story. And what's funny is, like you said, there's so many misconceptions around childbirth that when you first hear these things, like that childbirth it can be joyful and it can be enjoyable sometimes, and you can have this, you know, great experience. Like, when you first hear that, you're like, what? Like, that literally goes against every single thing in the traditional medical field that women are normally taught. And so I want to talk about some of those misconceptions. Fear is a huge one, like, because of the fear of, gosh, fill in the blank. There's so many things that women are fearful of when it comes to birth. Pain. That pain is inevitable. Like you said, it's not always about necessarily being 100% pain-free, but it's about creating like that, you know, enjoyable experience, that God-filled spiritual experience. But so other than being fearful of things and mostly of the pain, like, what are some other misconceptions that we are just literally taught or not taught about when it comes to giving birth, that is just kind of just like generally known but not necessarily always true?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the biggest is that it's supposed to be painful. I mean, that is really the crux of what my messaging is attacking, is this idea that birth is supposed to be painful, that there's no way around it. And a lot of that comes from a lot of places, but I think at the root, a lot of it comes from some misinterpretations of Bible verses, where throughout, you know, the history of our country, at least, founded on certain Judeo-Christian principles, we look back at the garden with Adam and Eve. And even if you're not religious, even if you didn't go into Sunday school hearing about how God cursed Adam and Eve in the garden, it's permeated in our society that birth is supposed to be painful. We've all heard this. Women are told this, and we hear stories from other women. So I think that it's fascinating, and I just recorded a podcast on what that verse actually means and what the root word pain actually is translated into. For it's atzab, when it says that your birth will, that you will have intense pain in childbirth. In pain you will bring forth children. That's the verse in Genesis 3:16 that, you know, we use to say that God cursed Eve with pain in childbirth, and therefore all women for all time will have pain in childbirth because of her sinning in the Garden of Eden. So when we actually look at the root of that word, it stands for, it's only translated as emotional pain or toil or grief or sorrow. In every other time it's used in Scripture. Only in that one verse is it translated physical pain, which I find very interesting, because even the very next verse, where it's talking about Adam having to toil the ground all the days of his life, in toil you'll bring forth, you'll sow, and you'll, you know, harvest and all that, you know, essentially cultivate the earth. And even that word for toil is the same root word, atzab. So in some translations, the translators said, okay, we're going to call it toil for Adam, but pain for Eve, which is ironic because it's the same root word. So essentially, it's not talking about physical pain. Yes, there's emotional pain. Yes, we're in a world where we're in a fallen world. We're in a world where there's still evil, regardless of your religious beliefs. Like, we can all look around and see that there's evil in the world, that there's pain, that there's poverty, there's suffering, and we live and birth and raise children in a world that is imperfect. And there's grief in that. There's sorrow in that. And there's sorrow in childbirth. I mean, we were just talking about that with all the things women experience, whether that's miscarriage or stillbirth or infertility or just the sacrifices women make. And regardless of how you interpret that, the bottom line is that God didn't say women are cursed to have physical pain in childbirth, and that's just the way it is. That's just the end of the story. And there's no way around it. And I think we like to talk about that as if it's a badge of honor. Like, oh, my birth was super painful. And this is, all these things happened in my birth. And all of this, I had all these complications. And thank God I was in the hospital. And, not to discount that there are real times when medical intervention's needed. And thank God for that. But it's almost like women wear their pain or their complications or their trauma as a badge of honor these days, and even compare, my trauma is worse than yours. Like, I hear these conversations, and it's almost radical and offensive to talk about birth in a way that can be life-giving and hope-filled and joyful, because those who are attached to their trauma and their suffering as if it's part of their identity, it really shakes them and offends them. And I'm not here to dismiss or diminish anyone's pain or suffering or anyone's story, regardless of how painful it was, regardless of what women went through in their birth experience. I think everyone's story is beautiful and deserves to be honored and heard and is valuable. But this notion that birth has to be a certain way because, well, I experienced pain in my labor, or I experienced this, that means it's that way for everyone, is just not true. And we have to learn that in many ways we have so much power over our mindset and our experience and in how we perceive pain and how our childbirth can unfold. There's many things we can't control in birth, but this idea, to answer your question in another way, like, what other myths are there? What other misconceptions are there? I think this misconception that birth happens to you, labor happens to you, contractions happen to you, as if it's this outside force that just randomly comes on you and just randomly could be an emergency, randomly it could be extremely painful, and it's completely random and unforeseen. And there's actually a code, there's actually a blueprint. When we study the blueprint and the physiology of childbirth, it makes perfect sense. In many times, I'm not saying I can explain every birth and what happened in everyone's labor, but there are patterns. And when you study the patterns, you can align yourself with the right mind, the mindsets and the thoughts and the beliefs, and doing the things that produce oxytocin and endorphins that then reduce pain. And if you partner with fear and anxiety and stress and tension and disbelief and doubt and discomfort, all of those things are going to release hormones that produce more pain. So we see patterns. And childbirth is not random. So I think this idea that it's just like you're spinning a Russian roulette thing and whatever you get, you get. And it's just out of our control. And that's in many ways the way the medical establishment would want us to view birth, as if it's an emergency waiting to happen, which at the end of the day truly disempowers women, because it's taking all the responsibility of birth and just throwing it out there to the universe as if, well, this just happened to me. And again, there are emergencies that can happen, but there's also a reason we don't see so many of these emergencies in home births. And there's a reason some women can experience reduced pain and others experience a lot of pain. And we see those complications and intervention rates increase with certain environments. We can look at these patterns, we can look at birth outcomes, we can study this. And I think a lot of people aren't willing to actually look closely at it And a lot of women are afraid to look at it because it means I have to take full responsibility for my birth experience. I have to look at how my fear may have contributed to the tension or the pain, or how the environment or the provider I chose may have contributed to that. And I'm not saying what happened in labor was your fault, that you're to blame, that you should take on guilt from that. That is not my message. What I am saying is there are ways we can set ourselves up for an empowering birth. Also knowing, and this is kind of the dichotomy, is that we have so much power, and yet we also have to hold our labors with an open hand and believe that we have no power. It's like we have no control, I should say, is a better way to say it. We have so much power, but we also can't control it. And that energy of trying to control it actually produces the outcomes we don't want. So it's such a fine line to walk, but it's fascinating. I could go on about it all day.
Yeah, no, that was also so perfectly said. And talking about what you were just saying is, I talk about that all the time, and I talk about it mostly just in life in general, but when it comes to childbirth, like the same is true. I say this a lot, when we when we find true peace and we let go of fear, it's when we start putting our energy into the things that we can control, and let go of the things that we don't have any control over. And I think that's where one of those misconceptions with childbirth is we think that we have no control over anything. And
Right.
like you said, yes, of course, there are, of course, certain things we have no control over in childbirth, but there are a lot of things that we can do to prepare ourselves physically, mentally, emotionally, all these things. And so, but there's not well, I shouldn't say there's not a lot. We're definitely in a time where there's more education because of people like you, empowering women and trying to educate women that they do have more control. But when you go down that traditional medical, journey, and you're just another, patient 138 or whatever at the OB's office, like, they're not teaching any of these stuff. They're not empowering women. They're just, you're this, you're this far along, you're at this, percentile, blah, blah, blah. Like, that's all it is. And so we just become victims to it, but it doesn't have to be like that. And another thing that you said that I love is, it's almost like people, and I talk about this a lot when it comes to just health in general, that people don't necessarily want to take full responsibility of, I'm going to say, the outcome. And like you said, there are certain circumstances. I'm somebody who is a perfect example that, because I had a previous stillbirth, like, okay, that was nothing that I had control over, whatever. I won't go down that road right now. But the point is taking full responsibility over something it can feel like a lot of pressure, a lot of work. You have to work a little bit harder. You have to do a little bit more research. You have to take the time to do these things. And some people will either use an excuse as to why they can't, or they don't want to, and so they're just at the whim of whatever happens. But this other thing that you mentioned that I want to dive into a little bit is just, I believe you use the term redemptive childbirth often in some of your podcasts. And I love that, because that is what I'm preparing myself for currently. And I want to talk about that because I think a lot of our listeners will really resonate with it and get a lot from it. Birth trauma comes in all different forms. I only have one experience. I had a perfectly healthy pregnancy, and it ended up she ended up being stillborn. And so I'm very determined to have what I think you would call a redemptive childbirth. So I'm curious, do you talk to a lot of women? Do you hear from a lot of women? I know you get endless amounts of testimonials from people who have taken your course and things like that. But do you hear and speak with a lot of women who have had like a late term loss or stillbirth or things like that, have a redemptive, pain-free, unmedicated, natural childbirth, and have joyous things to say about it?
Yeah, I've definitely had friends, I've had clients, and heard many, many birth stories of women asking for just insight and help. And I think that there's also a grieving process that women go through too, that before they even want to talk about it with someone on the outside, or even with someone like me, there's a lot of feelings. There's guilt, there's shame, there's questions. Did I do something wrong? But I've seen many women go on to have redemptive childbirths after a late term loss. And it's one of the most, I've never experienced that, but I can imagine one of the most painful things a mother could ever experience. So my heart goes out to women like that. And I've definitely seen incredible stories. Some dear friends of mine have had that happen. And and it's always a challenge to like process through that and then prepare your heart for the next one, because there's always those fears of what if this happens again? And I think that there's a unique kind of birth preparation that needs to happen for women in that situation, because you're not just dealing with the, I'll say, typical childbirth fears that all women have of pain in birth and what if something goes wrong. You actually have hard evidence of something going terribly wrong that is very real and very tragic. And that's reality for you. That's a lived experience. And so who's to say like that won't happen again? I mean, we could look at statistics and go, well, the chances of it happening are very low. Even if it happened once, it's unlikely to happen again. But you were that 1 out of 1,000. Like you were the statistic that this happened to. We talk about that in the birth world. Like, well, the chance of a stillbirth or a late term, loss is one in less than 1% or 1 in 1,000. That's not zero. And for the women who are that 1 in 1,000 or one in whatever it is, 10,000 or less than 1%, you can't logic your way out of that. You can't logic your way to healing. You have to do the deep work, the deep grief, and then trust and find what does a redemptive birth look like to you? And I think if I'm working with someone, that's where I would start, is what fears can we process and release? And then what does a redemptive birth look like to you on the other side? And how can we prepare for those things? And not just in a way of like, here's the outcome that you want to have, obviously like healthy baby and fulfilling experience and whatever it is, but like, what do you want to feel in your birth? Right. What do you want to feel in your labor? What do you want to feel? And sometimes I think it's hard for women to even process that, who've experienced such a tragic loss, because it's like all you can hope for is that you can bring your baby home, right? And there's something that I think only those women can really understand who've experienced that, the kind of emotions and roller coaster ride that they go through. So, but I don't know all the answers, but I do know one thing, and that is that the Lord does redeem pain and suffering and heartache, and I would go back to Him and find what that truth is, that redemption is, to attach faith to and to aim for.
Yeah. And I think what makes a huge difference is what happened, because I know for me, I've spoken to lots of women with lots of different situations who had this issue, that issue. And for me, I wasn't given really a definitive reason. And so for me, everything still feels so vague. And so I felt like, other than my doctors considering me high risk this time, which other than my previous stillbirth, I have no reason to be considered high risk. I'm not in the age bracket. I have no major health issues. You know what I mean? So other than them considering me high risk, sending me for more scans and that, everything else is up to me to figure out, well, was it a, whatever I can possibly come up with in my head, I have to do the research on, I have to ask the questions. And so I think that makes a huge difference also how you move into another pregnancy and birth experience after loss, because if you have hard evidence, if you have an exact reason of what happened, you can keep your finger on that pulse a little bit better than if you have no information, which is how I feel going into it. But that's why I also feel more hopeful, because there's not this underlying condition. I don't have this, crazy health issue that is always going to make things super difficult for me. So I am very grateful in that way. And I actually saw a post, I think it might have been yesterday, it was very recent. You posted, you were talking with someone about gratitude in childbirth and having gratitude during contractions and all those things. And that resonated with me so much. Can you just explain a little bit like what you were talking about when it comes to like finding gratitude, like literally in the middle of a contraction? Like, what was that conversation about?
Yeah, it's, finding gratitude in the midst of a contraction, I think what that looks like is different for each woman. And for certain, someone who's experienced a loss could really, I think, lean into this, because I was talking in the context of women who go overdue or go late in their pregnancies, quote unquote late, but the baby's always on time.
Right.
But emotionally and mentally, it's so stressful for moms who are living in this masculine world of due dates and numbers and statistics, and we feel the pressure so much in our bodies when we go overdue. So for this particular woman who was sharing her story on my podcast, I made this sort of just kind of reflection that I've seen this often happen. Again, I look for patterns, and that is that when a woman who's very overdue finally goes into labor, there's oftentimes, if she's done the work and doesn't have a lot of fear in her heart, there's often so much gratitude that I'm finally in labor, that gratitude just kind of overrides a lot of the anxiety and fear of pain, and it releases the right hormones and endorphins to block pain. So because she's so excited to finally be in labor, that she's not focused on the pain and how hard the labor is and how hard the contractions are, because the pain of waiting was almost more than the pain of being in labor. So it's just this kind of little hack sometimes, and it's something all women can kind of tap into in labor, is gratitude. And it's such a simple thing because it rewires our entire parasympathetic nervous system. It actually syncs up our brain waves and our heart waves, and there's tons of studies on this, and it's such a powerful, simple tool to use. And I think for women, if you were to apply that to women who've experienced loss and tragedy, focusing on that gratitude of like every step of the way, my body's doing this. I got to this stage. I got to this number of weeks. I went in labor on my own. Oh my gosh, my water's breaking. Oh my gosh, that was a really hard contraction. My body's working so well. It's so powerful and strong. Like, what if we just flipped every negative thing that could be considered like bad, painful, suffering, and this notion that contractions are bad and harming you, we have to brace for them. Like, that's, if you flip that 180 and go, wow, thank you for this contraction. Thank you, body. You know what to do. You're doing a good job. You're protecting me. You're keeping baby safe. Like, baby's in there, and I'm so thankful I'm in labor. I'm so thankful it's all working. And just every step of the way, being that in that present moment, not trying to control the outcome and not looking back at the past, but just being in that present moment and being grateful for what's happening in that moment, does release certain hormones and that have a positive effect on labor.
Yeah, and it's so funny because people might perceive that as like cheesy, but what they don't realize is it has an actual physical
It does.
physical your body starts to have a physical response to that. Like, it literally is physically doing something to your brain waves, and your body is responding accordingly. Like, I remember I always used to think, like, back before I learned a lot about, your nervous system and all of these things, like how our body operates. I was very uneducated in this world. I thought people who had like this positive attitude were like, I'm like, get a grip. Like, have you never had anything hard happen in life? Like, why are you so positive about that? It's like, no, that's actually, like you said, it's like, it's almost like this hack in childbirth, but also in life. Like,
Yeah.
this is how we train our bodies to respond accordingly. Like, this is a silly example, but the other day I had just gone grocery shopping like 2 days before, and every single week I write out an entire list of what I need to buy, and I'm very thorough. I make sure I write it all down. And the next day, or literally later that evening, I realized I forgot 2 very essential things that I needed for the week. And I was like, oh my gosh. So the next day I had to run to the store on my way to pick up the kids from school, and it was downpouring, like absolutely downpouring. Something happened. I like dropped something on my way out to the car, blah, 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 whatever. And as I'm walking back out, I had checked out, I'm carrying my bag, I'm, holding my hood, trying not to get my hair wet. I'm waddling because I'm really pregnant. No, I always have to pee. So I'm just like in this inconvenient moment, right? And I'm like, my initial response was like, oh, this is so annoying, And then I was like, I told myself, I'm like, listen, Emily, you know what hard is. This is not hard. This is just inconvenient. Like, this is just not fun. Like, but
Right.
how grateful am I that I finally, all my life I've been wanting to be a stay-at-home mom, a homemaker, and here I am. I'm able to do it. I'm able to run to the store. I'm able to take the time to prepare, to go get the groceries that I need to prepare this delicious homemade meal for my, and it's just total perspective change. And when I shifted from gratitude, from stressed and annoyed and inconvenienced to gratitude, I was no longer uncomfortable. Like, I literally was no longer uncomfortable. And I know that's like the silliest example, but like you said, it's like this mini hack that we can use in childbirth. And I can't speak out of experience yet, but I'm very, very hopeful to put that concept into practice because of my past experience. Like, I've never experienced childbirth knowing that my child was going to come out alive. Like, childbirth was very hard for me to get through because there was nothing to be joyful about in the moment. You know what I mean? And I only I only decided to go into, well, I had to be induced, but I decided against a C-section because I had prepped myself mentally and physically to labor with my daughter, and I really, really wanted a vaginal birth. And so, but
I
it's
think
not
that's
the same,
beautiful. I think
know?
that's just so beautiful that you did deliver her vaginally, even
Yeah.
knowing she wasn't coming out alive. And
Yeah.
I can't imagine that, but I've heard from other women who've experienced this that was such a healing, not healing entirely, but it was allowed them to move through the grief in a really powerful
Yeah.
way, to experience the depth of those emotions in labor, in a way that sometimes you don't get with a
Yes.
cesarean. So I don't know if that was your
Well,
case.
yes. In the moment, you feel robbed of so many things. You feel robbed of everything in that moment, especially when it comes to childbirth, because you prepare and you prepare and you prepare, and then all of a sudden it's like everything changes. And so my initial response was C-section, just get her out. Like, I want to be done with this. And like you said, it was a way to move through the first step of healing. And being able to say, I was robbed of so many things, but this is something that I don't have to be robbed of. I can still have this experience. And I did it out of pure love for her. I did it out of pure love for her story, because we had tried getting pregnant for almost 6 years, and it was like, it was so exciting when we got pregnant. And so it was out of pure love for what I knew that her story was going to turn into. Somehow I knew very early on, like in those moments, that I knew it was going to, that her life and my story was going to be a much bigger story, in the future. And so, but I think that's the best way that I can describe it is, and if anybody decides to get a C-section, once they have found out, like, there's no judgment. It doesn't matter. Like, you do what you have to do in that moment for your mental and emotional health to get through it. But for me,
absolutely.
I felt so robbed. Because I didn't have to be robbed of that, I wanted to take the opportunity to do it. And that actually kind of leads me to what I want to ask you more on a personal level, but I think this will definitely be interesting for women who have. So, because of our past experience, my dream is to have a home birth. My husband's like, no way. Like, you're going to be in the hospital. God forbid anything happens. God forbid something goes wrong again. Like, we don't want to chance it. I'm like, okay, I get it. Cause there is, you have to use wisdom, right? Like, yes, we were created to do this. And yes, there are less complications, like you said, like less interventions, less complications often in home births, but we still have to be smart and use wisdom. Again, I would love to have a home birth one day. I'm still holding out for that. But anyways, I want to know, is it possible? I know it is, but I want to talk about it, to have a very natural, spirit-filled, supernatural childbirth in a hospital setting, because I think a lot of women are looking for both. They want that experience, but there's still a little bit of that, like, but I just want to be at a hospital just in case, kind of. So is that possible to marry those two together?
Yeah, I talk about this a lot, and I have a whole like module in my course called Pain-Free Birth in a Hospital. And a lot of people will say, "Oh, it's not possible to have a physiological birth in a hospital." I've seen it. My clients have had it. I share women's stories all the time of women who've had it. I will say, as a caveat to that, it's a lot harder. It's a lot harder. And there are some must-haves you have to have in place in order to have that kind of experience in the hospital, because it is not easy. So not going to BS you. Like, I'm going to tell it to you straight, not sugarcoat it. It's uncommon, and it takes a lot of work, a lot of hard work, a lot of mental prep, and a lot of advocacy, and a lot of having the right team. If you don't have the right team, your chances are slim to none. You have to have a provider that's going to shield you and really protect you and knows deeply what your wishes and desires are. I'd say that's probably the most important, next to preparation. But I've seen it. And it really, I think, all comes back to mom and what she desires. And for a lot of women, after a tragedy like that or a complicated birth, they will say, I just needed to be in the hospital because that gave me reassurance. Other people will say, I just need to be at home. So I would really honor your desires, even though you and your husband are on the same page right now, and explore where those fears are coming from for both of you, him and you, like, you know, and how that connects to the previous birth. And really finding a provider, regardless of whether you choose to birth in a hospital or home, but finding a provider that is trauma informed and understands the physiology of birth, like hopefully a midwife, or someone who practices the midwifery model of care, because not all midwives actually do. But that would be my first recommendation. And then in terms of just the preparation, is it possible? Yes, and I think it's a deep journey. Like, it's not. I wish there was an easy button. Like, just click it and you're good. You got your perfect birth. Like, there's no easy button to birth. It's choose your hard. Like you were saying, like, this is inconvenient, but let me shift my perspective here. This is what I've always wanted. I wanted to be a mom, a homemaker. Like, choose your hard. And maybe that's your motto going into this hospital birth is, I'm choosing my hard. This is hard. And this isn't easy, but I'm going to go inward. I'm going to go deep. And what I tell women birthing in hospital who want a physiological home birth, essentially, like, I want to have a home birth in a hospital. And there's some things that you just aren't really possible or very unlikely. Like, you're going to get pestered to get an IV. You're going to have to go through triage most likely. You're going to probably need to get that 10-minute, 20-minute strip of continuous fetal monitoring. You're going to have nurses interrupting you and taking your blood pressure. Choose your hard. Like, what's important to you? If there are certain things you want that are really important, know to advocate for those, put them in your birth plan, talk about them ahead of time with your provider. But most of all, it's the deep heart work. Because here's what I say, your internal environment will trump your external environment every time. And the reason I choose home birth, and many women choose home birth, is because we can control the external environment. And we understand how that environment directly impacts our hormonal physiology in childbirth. Bright lights, interruptions, noise, who's there, who's walking in the room, the kind of energy people are bringing, all of that is out of your control in the hospital and can disrupt your physiology. But if you're in a home, you can control all that. But if you understand how it impacts you, and you deeply understand your physiology and what your fears are, what your triggers are, what your irks are, what walls you hit in labor, where that fear is and where it's coming from, if you are deeply connected to that internal dialogue and your body, you can control your internal environment and block out the external environment. But it comes from a deep connection to your body and your physiology, and knowing how every little interruption, every little tone of voice that someone speaks to you, and every news of, oh, you're only 5 centimeters dilated, or we're going to give you Pitocin now. Like, is it coming from an energy of fear or from faith and confidence? And you have to be so strong to have that confidence in yourself, which again is hard after you've experienced something like you have. But you have to have that confidence when everyone else around you is doubting you. And typically that's going to be the case in a hospital setting. The nurses and the doctors are all going to want to be cautious, especially with your history. And they're just generally more cautious anyway. They treat every woman like she's high risk in reality. And so
Right.
they're always preemptively doing things to prevent, the 1% happening. And maybe that helps you, maybe that doesn't. Like everyone's going to interpret that differently. Okay, well, someone else
Right.
might have a tragedy happen and say, I want all the interventions because that makes me feel like I'm more in control. Give me the
Yeah.
IV. Give me the Pitocin after delivery. Like, give me everything because I can't have this happen again. And I get it. Like, if that
Yeah.
gives you peace, do it. But know for you what creates peace and what creates fear, and know that you're up against a lot of fear in a hospital setting. Just point blank, no matter who you are, you're up against a industry of fear that will attempt to manage you in order to make them less afraid, because they're the ones bringing that. And they talk, it's cautionary, right? But that's just the MO. That's just how the operating system of a hospital. It's a business, and it's liability based, and it's fear based, and it's management based, and it's looking at charts and numbers, not looking at the whole person and what
Right.
a woman needs in labor for her physiology to work well. But you can know that. They're not the experts in physiological birth, but you have to be the expert in physiological birth, and you have to be the expert in your trauma, and you have to be the expert in your triggers, and you have to be the expert in your nervous system, and you have to be the expert in your hormones, and you have to be the expert in your thought process and the tape you're playing in your head. And that's how you can have a physiological birth in a hospital.
I love that so much because it's everything I'm trying to do right now. It is everything that deep heart work so that I can have that experience and that I can, like what you just said was your internal
Environment.
will trump
Yeah,
environment will trump your
you're
external. Like
yes.
that, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying
Yeah.
to work so hard internally right now because I know that I'm going into a very hard situation. I'm choosing the hard to decide to have a natural as possible birth in a hospital setting, and I know
Yeah.
this. And I think a lot of women feel like that too, at least in the community that I'm in. And so, but I love that there is hope for it. I love that it is possible when you do the work. And that's another thing that I try to empower women all the time is like, it's our responsibility. We have to be the experts. We have to be the one who knows our
Yeah.
internal struggles
Yeah.
and our triggers and all of those things. It's nobody else's responsibility, especially when we walk through those doors with
Yep.
the grief and the trauma and the experiences and the flashbacks and all of those things. Nobody else knows any of that
Yeah.
unless you have, somebody there with you, which we
Which
have
is a good
decided to
idea.
hire.
Yeah.
Yes, I was going to say we've decided to hire a doula, and I would imagine that you are a huge advocate for
Huge. Yeah.
having a doula, midwife,
Yeah.
someone with you in a hospital setting.
Yeah. Because you need someone there for sure to process through those walls. You're going to hit those walls. And the goal is not perfection. It's not
Right.
deal with all my trauma, all my fears so that they never show up in labor. Like that's highly unlikely because
Yeah.
labor squeezes everything in you out of you and you have to go through it. But what you do want to aim for is like stark raving honesty with yourself. And if you can do that and recognize every moment that fear enters your heart, that's why I say your internal environment trumps your external environment. Every moment fear enters your heart, don't let it rule your heart, but confess it, say it out loud, be honest, be brutally honest. Oh man, I feel like this is going to last forever. Or I'm so scared right now that this intervention is going to lead to XYZ. Or I feel like a burden because this is taking so long. Like these are real fears that women have in birth from real clients I've had, that when they voice them, their labor pattern shifted, their baby descended, their baby came within half an hour when they were stuck for hours. Like that kind of brutal honesty in the face of a hard situation is going to unlock your physiology in a brilliant way. And it's when we try to suppress it and neglect it and avoid the hard emotions and feelings that it trips us up and it stalls us and it creates that subconscious tension in our body that actually is that fight or flight or freeze response, which is the opposite of what you need in labor. So all of that physiology is happening in the background, whether you know it or not. And being aware of it is really the golden ticket to having a pain-free birth or just a physiological birth in a hospital. And knowing what's going to trip you up, knowing how the external environment is impacting your internal environment, and not being afraid to ask for help for people to leave the room, for declining, a vaginal exam, for example, being able to have all of that communication or advocacy happen without it throwing you off. Or if it does throw you off, recognize it and know how to get back to the
Yeah.
parasympathetic state. It's so much self-awareness, and self-awareness is really the hardest part. If you can master that and master physiology, then it's just you're going to move through it one step at a time. And you're going to move through the hard contraction. You're going to move through the bad news of I'm only this far along. And you're going to, whatever the roadblock is, you can move through it. Because the only reason the hospital environment is so unconducive to birth is because of the way it impacts the internal environment. And if you know that, you can preemptively plan ahead for it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love what you said about releasing those fears. I remember in your masterclass that you do, you ask everybody who's there, like, what are your fears? Like, write them down. And then you ask why. Like, why are you afraid of those things? And then I don't remember exactly what you said, but you in a nutshell, you had everybody say out loud to themselves, sitting at their desk or wherever they are watching your class, to release those. And I remember just seeing all these comments like coming in, like, why am I crying? Like, I feel so much better. I feel so much more relieved. And it's just, these are the things that nobody's telling us. Like, at least nobody in the medical field are telling us. And
right.
That's why I'm so grateful for this kind of education, and this platform and this course and all these things that you've created, because it's like, these are so important, especially in situations like mine and like women who are listening, who so desperately want to experience something that maybe they feel like they were robbed of, or maybe that they've always been afraid of, or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, there are so many practical tools out there that women are just not being given, traditionally, at least.
Right.
And so I'm so thankful for that. And I'll never forget that feeling of you going through that release. And I was like, gosh, like, I need to do this more. This is part that now it's become kind of part of my prep, like leading up to birth. And you talking about, that fear turning into tension, turning into pain, like that cycle that you talk about is like, something that I'm also, working on and constantly reminding myself. And I practice at home, like anytime I'm about to, like, I do the ice thing, that the ice
holding onto the ice cube.
Yeah.
Isn't that wild? Did it work for you?
Oh my gosh, totally.
Isn't it crazy?
The first time, I think I barely could do it for like a minute or something like that. And then the second time, it was like over 2 minutes long. And with the way that you tell us to breathe through it and things like that, I was like, I can't believe it's been almost over 2 minutes. Like, my mind was like blown, and I'm like, like, I need every woman like to know about this. And so,
I know, and so it like proves the whole point. Like, for women who say, "Oh, pain-free birth isn't possible," like, just then your brain blocked pain, and people are like, "Okay, it's physiology." Like, and that's the only. It's science. Like, your brain is programmed to block pain when you have the right hormones.
Yes.
Whether it's an ice cube or whether it's contractions.
Exactly. And I'm very excited to put all these things into practice. I know it sounds crazy. Like, I'm excited after everything that I've been through, after everything that a lot of women who listen to this podcast and follow me on social media, like, I hope that this episode is bringing some hope and excitement to childbirth, and even just doing hard things in life, painful experiences, like whatever it is. Like, I know we're specifically talking about childbirth, but all of these things can be used in a lot of these situations in life, and learning how to heal that inner trauma and release those fears and all of those things. It's not just specific to childbirth, although that's what we're talking about today. And so I guess as we kind of wrap up there, I want to give you an opportunity, Karen, to just put out there like whatever you want to put out there, like your social media, your course, like anything that you want women to get a hold of, get their hands on. I want to give you an opportunity to just share all of that with everyone who's listening.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and I just totally agree. One of the sayings that I'll mention, I thought of this earlier when you were talking, but it's like life happens for you, not to you. And that's just something that I've learned to live by in life, whether it's birth or life. It's like, this is happening for me, no matter how horrible or hard it is. this is happening for me and there's gold in it, and I'm going to find that gold. I'm going to learn,
Yeah.
I'm going to get stronger, I'm going to overcome this. It's going to make me a better person, rather than a victim mentality that says, this is happening to me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a victim of my circumstance. These contractions are happening to me. I have to suffer through them, or it's happening for me. I get to experience them and partner with my body and my baby. Like, your mindset is everything in life
It's
and in
everything.
birth. And in birth, it's like a pressure cooker. It immediately releases different hormones, whether you're in fear or whether you're in gratitude.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the name of the game. And
Yeah.
so yeah, processing those fears is class 1 in my pain-free birth e-course. And we walk through all the things that have conditioned us toward fear in birth, and you'll realize things that you didn't even realize were there because they're subconscious. And then we dissect, where do they come from, who taught us, and is that even your story? Most of us are carrying people's stories that aren't even ours into our
Mm.
own labor experience. So we intentionally release those fears. That's step 1, class 1. The rest of the course is filled with breathing techniques, um, understanding the hormonal physiology that we've been talking about on the show, and mastering it for whether you're giving birth in hospital or home. And then it's just got a whole bunch of spiritual stuff, a whole bunch of practical stuff, techniques, positions. It's got all anything you need to take full ownership and plan for an empowered, beautiful birth experience, whatever that means to you. And so that's my best-selling course. For those who aren't ready for that, you mentioned the pain-free birth, or the 3 keys to a pain-free birth masterclass. So that's a free 1-hour masterclass where I give you 3 of my favorite keys to having a pain-free birth, and one of them has activations. It's filled with activations. Like, I swear I give away my best stuff in this masterclass, because you literally get to see in real time how your brain blocks pain, and you get to process through fears, and you get to see the responses of women going through it at the same time as you. And it's really exciting. So I've had women message me saying, oh my gosh, I had a pain-free birth just from watching this class. I will say the benefit of investing in the full course is that you get way more in-depth information, especially in physiology, in how to have a pain-free contraction every time, and in pushing, which can be a huge game changer. If your goal is a natural physiological birth, a lot of women will prep and figure out having a good birth, and then it comes to pushing and it gets sabotaged, especially in a hospital, with coached pushing and all kinds of interventions. And so I cover that in depth. You can't just do it in an hour masterclass, but there's radical testimonies that come out of that, of women who are saying, like, my body pushed my baby out. I didn't even do it. I labored my baby down. I used the breathing techniques you teach. I didn't tear it all with a 10, 11-pound baby. Like, the testimonies I got are just out of this world. And it literally just blows my mind. Like, not literally, but it figuratively blows my mind every time, because I hear these stories and women are like, this is crazy. And I'm like, that is crazy. I love it. I love it. So you can find all of that on painfreebirth.com, and my Instagram handle is @painfreebirth. There's a link there. I can give you the link too for your listeners, so that they can listen to that free masterclass. I think it will be up. We are going to take it down soon. So if you're hearing this, make sure you listen to it quick, because we are going to revamp a lot of our offers, but it is, I think, still available for the current time being. And yeah, I'll send you all of that so you guys can resource yourself even more.
Yeah, that would be great. Yes, I can attest to the masterclass. I took so many notes from it, and like I said, I'm already putting into practice so many things that I learned, and I'm already I feel so much more educated and confident going into birth, literally just because of that class. So anyways, Karen, thank you so much. I'm so grateful that you agreed to come on today. I know that my listeners are just going to eat this up, and I'm so grateful for your knowledge and what you're doing in this space and educating women in a way that the medical field just isn't. And especially for people like me who just are, just holding on to hope for everything that birth was meant to be, after loss and trauma and grief and all these things. Like, you are offering so much hope to women like me. And so I'm just so grateful. So thank you for everything that you're doing and everything we talked about today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, Emily, for having me on, and I'm cheering you on every step of the way.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And thank you to everyone so much for listening to this episode. I hope you are leaving feeling educated and inspired and ready to conquer childbirth. And if you're not pregnant at the moment, maybe spread the good news that not all childbirth has to be terrible and painful and traumatic and all these things. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more episodes just like this one. I cannot wait to chat with you all again really soon. Signing off for now, your hope dealer, Emmy Smaz.